context, kind of set the stage, and then we'll get into introductions and talk a little bit about technology, the built environment, real estate tech, a bunch of really, really fun, cool stuff. But a little bit about my background. So I'm a very, very proud Villanova School of Business graduate. I graduated from I believe it was the MBA Fast Track program in 2012. 2-year program, part-time, really, really exciting stuff. I graduated with a degree that was a specialization in real estate finance and international business. I learned a heck of a lot along the way, and so I'm always thrilled to death to have an opportunity to come back to Villanova. And believe it or not, I'm a Naval Academy graduate. So as much as I look to the Naval Academy as a place that I learned a lot about myself, personally and professionally, how to lead, how to do a lot of interesting things, which I'll talk about. Villanova is really near and dear to my heart because I think from a business perspective, as a aspiring entrepreneur, I was able to really hone my skills and meet really, really smart people that were in my cohort, who I still call friends to this day, that have had a big impact on my success as an entrepreneur. So Villanova is very, very dear to me. Quick story. So I graduated the Naval Academy in 2005. I played soccer there. After graduation, I drove ships around the world for about 4.5 years or so. I was a surface warfare officer, essentially a ship driver. Did about 3 deployments in a 4-year period, 2 to the Persian Gulf, 1 to Southeast Asia. Did a lot of fun stuff like anti-piracy off the coast of Somalia, worked with the Israelis in the Middle East, managing oil platforms and air defense. And then I came back to Philadelphia. I said, I don't care what the job is, just get me back to Philly. That's kind of where I grew up, along with my wife. We've been best buds since the 8th grade. So I'm from Southern New Jersey originally. So I said, I'll take any job in Philly. And they put me in a Navy recruiting role, which was great. I learned a whole lot about myself and sales, trying to recruit people to be Navy attorneys and Navy ministers. I was the chaplain and JAG recruiter for the Mid-Atlantic region. And that was a fun experience, really honing my sales skills, because it's really difficult these days to join the military. Less than 1% of our population is even eligible to serve these days. And so during that time period, I had come across this article, and it was really fascinating. It was this Entrepreneur magazine. It was about a company called The Makery up in Brooklyn, New York, and it was one of the very, very early co-working spaces. I found it fascinating because I had a passion for real estate, but I also had a passion for early stage businesses, and the idea that there was these places where people could work together and collaborate together and share ideas and new things could be created was really cool to me. So by that time, Jen and I, we dated, we got married, and what was that, 2011, 10, something like that? She's my better half in like every single category, FYI, and I think you'll see that tonight. But 2010, I do my MBA here while still in the Navy, graduate in 2012, and then the goal was I wanted to get out of the service and I wanted to get into business. And so read that article about the Makery in Brooklyn, decided that Jen and I were going to throw our hats in the ring and build a co-working space. We did a quick competitive analysis of the Philadelphia region. We were living in Old City at the time, or at least I was, and I realized that there was a small boutique co-working company called Indy Hall right down the street, literally like 500 yards away from where I was living. I could have thrown a stone. But through that discovery, I saw, man, there's this co-working space, which was really for independent contractors and technologists and software developers. I thought it was interesting, but I had a different vision. We wanted to build something that was going to cater to the professional. And so we launched Benjamin's Desk in 2012 at 17th and Walnut in a very, very boutique building at the corner of the northwest corner of 17th and Walnut. It was owned then by a REIT called Kimco. Kimco is a shopping center REIT. They had gotten very bullish pre-recession, buying a lot of what I would call non-core assets. This being one of them, the Almond Building. They bought it for, I think, about $12 million in 2007. And then they ended up flipping around 2013 to a local real estate company called Pearl Properties for about $7 million. Took a big haircut on the building, but as a publicly traded company, shedding non-core assets was probably the right move, and I'm sure it affected their stock price as they shed a lot of assets that were non-core in the region. But Jen and I, we didn't really know what the heck we were doing. Like a lot of dumb entrepreneurs, you kind of start things and you figure it out as you go. And so we had a vision that we were going to cater to the boutique salesperson, the sole proprietor, the lawyer, the accountant, the traveling salesperson. And so we built Benjamin's Desk. We did, I think, a $75,000 small business loan from M&T Bank. We both took personal guarantees out on that. And we did about $100,000 in credit cards. some crazy company, they're out there, basically was willing to give us $100,000 of unsecured high interest credit, and we took it and we figured we'd try to make something work. And so to fast forward a bit, that was 2012, that was Benjamin's desk. I still operate my new company, which is called Houzer. I've stepped down from that business back in, 2014, 2015. I stepped down. Jen is the full-time CEO. I am just a lowly board member who doesn't have any say in the direction of the company. I've gone on to build a separate business. It's a venture-backed business called Houzer, a tech-enabled real estate brokerage firm that's disrupting how homes are bought and sold. And so I'm not here to talk about that. I think we're going to try to focus on prop tech and the effect of technology on commercial real estate. But I wanted to set the stage on the background here and really tell you two things. One, when I went to this MBA program, I understand you guys are undergrads, I didn't even understand how important the relationships I was going to build during that time and how important they are to me to this day. So I think the world of Tony Zaccardi, and you guys are very, very lucky and blessed to have him as one of your professors. I learned so much by pushing myself outside the comfort zone to participate in this MIT case competition, built some lifelong friendships, and Tony's one of them. And then Charlie Davidson, I can't say enough good things about Charlie. Charlie has just been not just a mentor of mine, literally since I've graduated from the program in 2012, it's been 6 years. He's not only been a mentor to me, he's been a friend to me. And he's helped me in a variety of ways in my personal and professional career. So I am forever grateful. The reason I share that is because when you're in the moment and you're sitting in these chairs as undergraduates and you think about just getting through the day and doing good on your tests and final exams and spring break and all that good stuff, do not miss out on the opportunity of these folks that are next to you. The folks that you go to school with will be your colleagues and your professional friends for life, and the relationships that they get started today and they're built in this room. So that's the first and second thing I wanted to share about Charlie and about Tony and the fact that I'm here. I'm going to turn it over to Jen to give her introduction and background, to give a little context, as well as Jerre. And then while they're doing that, I just want you to point out to the slide. We're going to go through their introductions and backgrounds. Jen and Jerre will talk a little about what 1776 is, how we got there. A lot of workspace trends that are affecting the built environment and why technology is affecting those things. And a lot of models that have emerged. All different types of models are emerging. A lot of them new, a lot of them really old, that look new, but are really from older models kind of revisiting the contemporary times. I'm going to jump in and talk about the wave of venture capital. I think that's a big force that's driving a lot of the change we're seeing in the industry. And then we'll kind of end with how real estate tech is now broadened into prop tech, the built environment, and what I think the future looks like in terms of urban tech and how we think about cities going forward. So without further ado, my better half, Jennifer.
Thanks. Thanks, Tony and Charlie, again, for having us tonight. We really appreciate it. It's nice to be here with all of you. As Mike mentioned, my name is Jen Maher. Just a brief background on me. I was this close to coming to Villanova for undergrad. I grew up in South Jersey. I was going to run on the cross country and track team, and then George Washington came in with an academic scholarship. I figured I'm not going to be an Olympian, so I might as well try to capitalize on my mind, so I went there. I had a single track mind growing up, and the whole time I was at GW, I was a criminal justice and psychology major. I wanted to be a criminal defense attorney. I was so excited to do that. I graduated in 3 years. I do not recommend that. Stay here as long as you possibly can. And then I wanted to come back a little bit closer to home, similar to Mike, getting back to Philadelphia, so I went to Villanova Law School. My timing was off in that I was in the old law school. I don't know if you guys have been on the other side of the tracks. Now they have this beautiful new law school. I only dealt with the construction of the new law school and was in the old building. That is coincidentally where I met Jerre as well. So I graduated law school, landed my dream job at Pepper Hamilton, which is a big firm here in Philadelphia. It actually has the most Villanova law grads at any law firm in the world. Loved the people that I was working with, loved the firm. Had an amazing secretary the entire time I was there. It was interesting work that I was doing, but realized that 24 years of work that I had built up to get to that point, that I was probably 6 months in and realized that I actually didn't like what I was doing at all and began the search for the next thing. Unfortunately, the timing was off in the sense that I graduated in 2007. Some of you were probably really young when this happened, but you might have heard that the world basically collapsed in 2008. I was very fortunate enough to still have a job, but was already starting to look at what the next out was and thought it was going to be in real estate for the first time. Started buying single family homes, renovating them. I spent a lot of time fixing things when I was younger, fortunately, so I was doing some home renovations on our own. Mike had, oddly enough, been doing sort of the same thing before we started dating, so then we were building up this sort of real estate piece of just buying single family homes, renting them, thought we were going to turn it into multifamily. When he read this Maker article, and at the time I would have done anything to get out of my job, so I figured, great, well that sounds like a great idea, we'll do a co-working thing and run an analysis on that, and that was where the timing ended up really being great for us, and just hitting the market very early on. You know, timing and location is everything when it comes to real estate, and we really hit the nail on the head looking backwards, but again, not really realizing what we were doing at the time at all. And really not know what we were doing. I actually ended up staying at my law firm job to basically fund the business in our lives until 2016, although we had launched in 2012.
That was a 1-year deal that turned into a 4-year deal, but we won't talk about that tonight.
Yeah, the backstory is Mike left his job, I stayed at mine, we launched the company, then he decides 2 years later he wants to start this other thing, and then I'm just super supportive. Not that I have any hard feelings about it at all, obviously. But well, I'll run through a little bit more about the evolution of where we got to after that. But it was great to have a full-time job, so we didn't have to take on venture capital money. We weren't responsible to anybody else but ourselves, and we could guide the entire direction of the company. And we, from that model, treated every dollar as if it was our own, because it was, and still do the same thing once we actually took on investment money, which I think is incredibly valued by our partners and our investors to this day. But starting it as we were growing and growing the business, we realized on the residential side when we were buying and selling houses that we were paying all these brokers money, and because I had my attorney license, it was actually pretty easy. All I had to do was take an exam, and magically I had my real estate broker's license, so we could represent ourselves. But I didn't really know much about commercial, and this guy I knew who was a commercial real estate broker kept taking me to lunch to try to pick up us as a client into our expansion, and we sort of flipped the script on him and brought him in-house, and that's how Jerre ended up here as part of the crew. So before I jump back to sort of the evolution of 1776, I'll flip it over to Jerre to get his background.
Yeah, so not a mayor, I'm not married to either one, but I'm incredibly fortunate that I got to meet Mike and Jen. I typically refer to myself as a recovered attorney. Used to be recovering, but I think we're fully in the past tense at this point. My journey is not nearly as interesting as the mayor's, but I was a hotel school graduate up at Cornell by way of background. So it was a lot of real estate, a lot of finance as an undergrad. Really kind of learning the art and the importance of service and hospitality is sort of the backbone of what we do, particularly now that we're operating in a space as a service type company. But for reasons that still escape me, when I graduated from Cornell, I took a really hard left-hand turn and eventually ended up in law school. The one thing that was great was I went to Villanova for law school, which is where I met Jen. I also met my wife, who is still a practicing attorney. But I graduated from Villanova Law in 2007, got a job as a big firm litigator. I had no intent of being a litigator, and I realized from day one that it was probably not going to be the right fit. I got tired of waking up in the fetal position. But after 6 years, I put the law in my rear view. I was incredibly fortunate for the education I had. I used the legal mindset every day. I think it's a really good background to have. It certainly helps us as we're growing the company, particularly that Jen has a legal license as well. But it wasn't the right fit for me, so after 6 years, I tried to figure out how could I get back to those real estate roots. Brokerage at that point in my life was going to be the cleanest connection, just going from litigator to figuring out what skill sets would be applicable. So I was fortunate enough to get a job as a commercial real estate broker, ended up going to another large international firm, doing that for several years, which is how I was trying to get back in front of Jen, saying I think co-working is taking off. I'd like to represent them as they continue to grow, and as Jen said, they kind of flipped the script on me. I was really fortunate to join what was Benjamin's desk at the time as the director of real estate, and I'm now the chief real estate officer of 1776, which post-merger, and Jen will go through that in a little bit, is the co-working company that we're running.
All right.
What? So I'll go through just a short time period because we touched on some of it. So we open our doors at the corner of 17th and Walnut with a very measly 3,000 square feet. And this was one of those, we did not have the go big or go home idea at the time. We thought, oh, it's 3,000 square feet. if everything goes horribly wrong, we will just move in here and live here and pay this as if it's our rent. Like that was the game plan. So we get 3,000 square feet, and we open at the corner of 17th and Walnut on August 1st, 2012. The timing that really worked on our side was there was this really small company at the time that was doing transportation services out of San Francisco, launching in Philadelphia, called Uber. So their Philadelphia team was coming here. We had 3 offices and 32 desks. That was it. And they came and said, we want 2 of your offices. So we said, great, that was a quick sale. So we literally opened our doors with them and another company called Jerre, which at the time was doing something completely different, but is now pivoted into Pinterest Analytics. They had 12 people on the team and were with the Uber team literally on August 1st, 2012 when we opened, and are now a 250-person company with headquarters in New York and London. So we were fortunate not only to have surveyed the market and realized that we were really filling a need from the commercial real estate side, and that this was coming on early on how people were going to be using office space, but it got our brand out there really quickly. And what it did was spread the word to other landlords in Philadelphia that we were really successful. We had filled the 3,000 square feet in 3 months. We had one other floor in the building that was vacant. We exercised our right to expand on that. By the way, we reviewed the lease and put in all these terms, again, not knowing what we were doing, didn't even have any other legal counsel review it. I did it myself. And it turns out it wasn't actually a bad lease that we did. We've taken some terms from it. But I did not have my broker's license, so we completely missed out on the commission, which was a stupid thing to do at the time. So we expand and start filling up the floor there. What happened to us a year later was the University of Pennsylvania reached out and said, we are doing an RFP process, and we need an outside agent to come in and manage our innovation space. You guys have pulled these companies in and helped them to grow by providing connections and resources to them. We want you to participate in the process to potentially win it. They didn't just hand it over to us, that was part of it. So we competed against people from around the world, and as maybe an 18-month-old company by the time it all came to fruition, and a single 6,000 square foot facility, the University of Pennsylvania chose us to manage their 56,000 square foot innovation center on a facility and a 26-acre campus that they had bought just south of where the main campus was. So that was a huge validator for us. The other thing that did, which I'll let Jerre dive deeper on it, it was the first foray into a management model. So we didn't sign a lease for 56,000 square feet. I never would have done that at that stage of the company, and we actually wouldn't do it now either. But what it did was formulate this whole new business model for how we were going to expand. We did go out and lease a couple other locations. We had a space at 6th and Walnut in Philadelphia. We still have about 10,000 square feet there on Washington Square. We have a spot in University City, and because we couldn't get any more space in the building at 17th and Walnut, we got space a half a block away at 16th and Walnut and picked up another 12,000 square feet to meet the demand and the overflow for that space. So we leased those locations, but then we really started expanding through this management model. And that's what Jerre leads up the whole expansion on that side. And of course the team starts to grow, and we hire other managers that are managing the campuses as well. And then other competitors are coming into the space. Co-working is really starting to take off now. We're in 2014, 2015. What was the year that you joined the company?
I'm in my 4th year now.
So 2014 was when we started building out the C-levels of the company. This was not going to just be a family affair anymore. We were bringing really great people into the company to work with us, be owners in the company with us, and be really invested in the future of the company. There was a company called 1776 that had launched in the spring of 2013 in Washington, D.C. We'd always been very friendly with them because they were doing very similar things, but we were both just regional players operating in the markets that we were in at the time. We started conversations with them in early 2017 about bringing some of their programming up to Philadelphia. We realized that we needed to differentiate ourselves in the market as more and more other players were just coming into the space, which I actually think is on this. Technical difficulties. So WeWork starts coming to town, Industrious, Pipeline. So it's a thing where you can just go and get a desk in an office almost anywhere, and co-working is really starting to explode. We realized that the connections that we had built in Philadelphia were great. We were providing really good access to our network for our members that were in our spaces. We believe and still believe that entrepreneurship is hyper-local. So 1776 is doing a very similar thing in DC, but they had already started to build out accelerators, which were 8 or 12-week really regular curriculum programs. They were application-based. You had to be a certain type of company to come into their spaces. They were just doing a lot of really cool things in terms of bringing corporate clients in and having them working with startups and matchmaking them from that perspective. So we started conversations with them about what if we could bring up some of your programming to our Philadelphia markets. And what we uncovered there was they said, what if you could actually bring your real estate expertise to our markets, because we want to expand, but you guys have built this model and we don't know how to do that from the operational side, but we had always believed that real estate was and still is the fundamental base to what we're doing for our business. So that's when we started shifting out of just straight co-working and really into a full incubation model. So we completed a transaction with 1776 just about a year ago. Our entire management team took over. So overnight, we were out of became a Northeast Corridor company instead of just a Philadelphia company, and I got super double platinum status on Amtrak, because that's pretty much where I live now, shuttling back and forth between DC and Philadelphia. But we were able to take that programming side and couple with our real estate expertise, and they had built a tremendous brand, so we were getting a lot of inbound leads. Everybody wanted to put a co-working space in their building. And we were, fielding those leads with the 1776 brand. We were getting, tenfold that, which is a lot of what Jerre sort of filters in and does a lot of site visits. But that was sort of how we got to now this incubation side. So it's completely membership based, and it is also application based. So you apply. We have a small committee on our team that reviews the application to make sure that it's high growth entrepreneurs that we're looking at, and then we have corporate partners that we bring into the space as well. So for example, at the Pennovation Center, which is the innovation center for the University of Pennsylvania, it's heavily geared towards robotics, engineering, biotech. We actually have shared lab space at that facility as well. But with that, we have Hershey's Innovation, which is everybody's favorite stop on the tour at that facility, because they have candy that they give out. They also have these really cool robots that they're building that walk around and hand out the candy. We have a drone facility on our campus there, so they can test out drones inside and outside. Qualcomm is there. DJI had an office there for a while. So we're bringing these major corporate companies in because they want access to the technology and the technologists that we're providing the programming and the resources for them to be able to grow their company. But again, it all comes back to the fundamental real estate piece of we need physical space for these people to convene and host the resources and the programs and the events that we're doing. So that on the management side was only how we expanded, and now we've entered some other verticals where we were just in office space, and then we entered the institution with the University of Pennsylvania, and I'll kick it over to Jerre to talk about the new vertical of retail that we've entered into on the management model, which is super exciting.
Yeah, so we just really formalized in the last half year a partnership with the Pennsylvania Real Estate Investment Trust. They own, I always forget the number, I think it's like 23 or 24 malls, primarily around the East Coast, but the Cherry Hill Mall, Plymouth Meeting Mall being the two that are in our backyard. Cherry Hill is probably one of the nicer and better performing malls in the country. And they had a really unique space where they were looking at doing something really creative with it, and historically has been really forward looking. I mean, when you think about shopping malls, there's a lot that are gonna just go under with the bankruptcies of the big box stores, et cetera. The malls that are surviving, the REITs, the mall owners that are surviving are the ones that have been really out in front of how do you diversify the experience for people that are going to the asset. So whether it's bringing in residential, whether it's bringing in hotels, whether it's bringing in upscale and more F&B as part of the tenant mix, and now also really kind of bringing in work. Because what they're trying to create, and it's a really smart thing to be doing, is these live, work, play, downtown type environments in suburban assets. So that's what we're doing at the Cherry Hill Mall. We're obviously kind of part of the work leg of that live, work stool. But what's really unique about this opportunity is not only are we not signing leases, we're going in as PREIT's operating partner to run co-working flex shared office space with an incubator component part of it, but we're also bringing in a retail incubator pop-up that's like basically a pop-up shop that's going to have its own glass storefront presence. It's about a 500 square foot box that's within the 11,000 square feet, give or take, that we have for our entire campus. And it's going to allow more and more companies that are e-commerce based, that are technology based, to trial balloon their product in real life against real potential customers and to see how that works. And then they can monetize off that, and we can monetize off it. But it really starts bringing retail into the the flex shared office world in a really unique and dynamic way, and we'll be up and running there. I'm hoping that we'll have our CO at the end of this week or early next week. It's been the fastest moving construction project that I've ever been part of. When Pre says move and the unions are doing the construction, they all moved really quickly. And so we'll be open going into the next couple of weeks. We'll hit the tail end of the holiday shopping season, and we'll do a big splashy ribbon cutting in January.
So the whole point of tonight's presentation from us is really to talk about the impacts that technology is having in real estate. And we had to try to pick focus areas to really target in on. This is actually one example, obviously, but if you guys have been to downtown Philadelphia, in the central business district, and maybe you haven't, but in many of the urban environments where we have our high retail streets, you'll see a dramatic change that's happening. Old retail is slowly dying. That's a big part of technology as Amazon and other e-commerce companies continue to eat the world, so to speak. But what you actually see is e-commerce first companies now being some of the quickest expanding retail companies. So companies like Bonobos or Warby Parker or Untuckit. These all started as e-commerce based companies that are now realizing that they can then make their retail expansion and experience as part of the digitally native environment and customer base that they built. And so I love the fact, and we'll talk about the built environment shortly, but I love the fact that technology is not only a disruptor, but it's also an enabler. And we'll kind of talk about some of the enabling aspects of technology as well. But because we're in the workspace business, we do want to focus a little bit on some of the workspace trends and the data behind what's driving this movement.
I do want to piggyback on that real fast, though. And one of the things that we're doing at the Cherry Hill location is an accelerator that we're running in the spring. So it's a 12-week long curriculum. It's weekly themes, marketing, legal, and we bring in partners to work with everybody. But that every accelerator has a goal, but it also we curate the right companies to come in. The one that we're running out of this space is not retail product selling companies. It's actually retail IoT technology. It's not super public yet, but it's being run and powered by a company that starts with com and ends with cast. That they're partnering with us and Pre to run this technology accelerator, so we'll be able to leverage executives on both sides of the table there. But the mall actually becomes our playground as well. So as all these technologies are being built out, some of them are the companies that we're seeing apply. We're using technology to make sure that the roof isn't leaking, and they put sensors in certain places. As you can imagine, a lot of the other stuff in retail is counting the foot traffic. So it's emerging companies in those areas that we can work with Pre, use the mall as a playground to actually test this technology, and then it's our resources, access to capital to continue to help and incubate and grow those companies, and we have the workspace for them to actually work as well. So it's this huge intersection of what's happening. And part of the reason that we were able to go into the mall and have had just explosion in the office space in general is because of what's happening in the trends of the way commercial real estate's being used. You probably don't read as much articles as I do about what's happening in shared office space, but you hear about it a lot, and it hits a lot of headlines, and there's a lot of money going into it, but it's only 2% of commercial real estate right now, and it's growing rapidly, and by anybody's accounts, it'll get to 30-some percent from JLL.
Yeah,
and
JLL
other
has a
ones.
pretty relevant study out there saying that by 2030, 30% of all office product across the board is going to be some form of flex shared office space. So if we're at 2% now, even if they're wildly off in their predictions, and I don't think that they are, there's a lot of room for growth. We're still at the sort of early innings, but the pendulum's not going to go back the other way. Space is being consumed entirely differently. Space is really about experience now. It's a service, and a lot of that comes down to technology. I mean, technology is what's leading to distributed workforces, right? I mean, this a lot of times is my office. Everything I do in the cloud is on here. From reviewing legal contracts to banging out pro formas, you can do it from a phone, from a computer. So corporations don't need to gobble up massive amounts of space like they used to. Millennials that are in the workforce don't want to be in traditional office space a lot of times. So corporations can still attract that talent, but house them a little bit more fluidly in other assets, in co-working spaces. And it's all enabled by technology, and technology really kind of pushing away the need for traditional paper-based industries.
Mm-hmm. And the workforce is becoming more and more distributed too. It's not necessarily customers that we would have as part of our membership, but there's certainly places for them where there's, especially in Philadelphia, it's eds and meds. There's a ton of pharmaceutical companies that have headquarters around here, but they're in Fort Washington, and if you're young and you want to live in the city, you don't want to do the reverse commute for an hour out to Fort Washington. And more of those companies, instead of signing a 10, 15, 20-year lease in a downtown office building, are just saying, I'll get you a membership to work a couple days a week at a WeWork so that you have that flexibility. So it's, when we first started, there was this stigma around co-working spaces that you were a company that worked in a co-working space because you couldn't afford to go get your own space, or you weren't a credit-worthy tenant and couldn't actually put up a security deposit and nobody would actually lease to you. That's completely gone out the window after the last 5 years, and now it's just becoming looked at more as a very smart business move for companies to grow inside of co-working spaces, because you're managing your risk and you're getting a plug-and-play environment where you don't have to deal with the fit-out and the construction and getting the FF&E and getting everything else set up, and it's just there for you.
It's funny, in 2012, technically Philly did like a little story on us. We just launched it. We didn't know what we were doing. We're a little small company. And the technical reporter just came into our office and he actually dubbed it as, this is like a corporate co-working facility, because to him, he was used to programmers and techies and guys slamming on and gals on computers. And like he thought we were corporate because it was like, there was actually glass and nice floors and like LED lights and cool stuff. But it's funny, I'm laughing now because I bought corporatecoworking.com after that article, and one of these days CBRE or JLL or Cushman's going to come calling, I'm going to sell it to them. So I told you guys that here first. Never forget that.
What we're also seeing on the technology side that's impacting us as a physical player is there's a lot of companies that are want to meet the demand of tenant retention and tenant attraction. So landlords themselves are building out these amenity spaces, and what they're finding is that nobody's using them because they're not actually activating and doing anything in the spaces. So along come these technology companies that are saying, oh, well, we built this app, and you can get all your tenants on the app, and we can figure out when they go into the gym in the building, and they can access the amenity space through this app, and we're going to throw some ice cream socials in the space or have a yoga class in the space. And then they're coming to us and saying, oh, we actually still need the physical operators. So that the app technology of the tenant having a great user experience, and really in those cases, a lot of it's just about the data, unfortunately, of tracking what the tenant mix is doing in the building. But they're coming to us and saying, we actually need somebody to physically operate these spaces. It's not just build it and hope people will show up in terms of building these amenity spaces. This is somewhat what I had touched on before, but where you're seeing all the trends go in this, as we shift from 2% of the market to 30% of the market in commercial real estate, is that there's a lot of these really high design, beautiful build out spaces with a lot of glass, and it's a lot of TI money that goes into these spaces, and it is very much geared towards the corporate co-working. A lot of people are trying to capitalize on what's happening in this side of more and more corporations not taking on long-term lease liability. And it's really just desks, walls, offices. That's what those companies are providing. We realized that we needed to shift further and further away from that, and that people weren't coming to our space because we have glass. One of the most innovative things we did was pick up this product called polycarbonate, which is somewhat translucent, but it is about 1/10 the price of glass. And our members loved it because, again, we were a bootstrapped company, so we needed to stretch a dollar as far as possible and make sure that our construction costs were really covered by whatever TI allowance we were getting from a landlord. And when we partner with a landlord, we don't want to just go in and spend our money for them. We want to make sure that they're going to see a return on their investment for however they build out the space. So it became way more than space, and that goes back to how we're shifting more into the incubation, focusing on growth entrepreneurs, having an application-based process so we can curate the membership around the partnership that we have with the asset owner. So for they're our partner on the Cherry Hill side, we can bring in more product-based companies, IoT technology companies, or companies that would actually make sense for them to look at and to hope that they would one day grow into their own space, within the mall. They grow out of our pop-up shop, and then they get a little kiosk in the mall. Or they do a deal with one of the bigger retailers in the mall and a big box player.
And what I particularly like about this slide, I'll talk about two things, is one, as I think about smart companies and I think about smart founders, being contrarian is actually a good thing. So when the rest of the world is going one way, being able to see something different and go the opposite way could be a bust, but it could pay huge dividends as well. And so that's why we like to see ourselves in that top left quadrant, because that's not where the crowd is going. And to Jen's point, co-working is corporate now. So we used to talk about, and I've had this conversation with Charlie, is Regus has been doing corporate co-working for decades. European-based company, 60 to 70% of their top line revenue comes from Fortune 500 companies. What you're seeing now is companies like WeWork and Industries that now have this scale to be able to meet the corporate needs. Because if I'm IBM and I want to push my consulting folks out of a WeWork, it doesn't do me any good if I only have 3 locations on the East Coast. But when you have 150 locations internationally, it's a much more compelling value proposition. And so, truth be told, I don't know what will happen to WeWork, Industries, and a couple of the other companies. There's a lot of crazy paper valuations that are out there. But I do want to point out the second thing. We're a small little, former family business turning into a real enterprise with real board members and real investors. Maybe $5 million revenue company with $10 million paper valuation. 3 Villanova team members. I find that really cool. But on the bottom right-hand corner, you see a small company called Convene, no longer small, but we're sitting where you guys were probably 10 years ago. Ryan Simonetti and his co-founder, Chris, their company has raised over $200 million and valued north of $500 million, taking a different approach to both Workspace, primarily through the meeting channel and being an amenity resource for landlords. So I think it's really cool as you think about where you're sitting today in Villanova. There are people that have graduated from this university doing some really, really big, cool stuff in the space.
I'll talk a little bit about our old model, and Jerre can talk a little bit more about what our new model is, since he's leading up that expansion side. And that's what a lot of those companies on that bottom corner are doing, of just going out and leasing space and then just taking that whole lease arbitrage. So they're just saying, great, we'll take it for $20 and we'll sell it for $50, and taking that whole arbitrage. And that was how we started from the co-working side, of course, and really just re-subletting space. It's the management model on our side that's really starting to change.
Yeah, and we've been pushing the management model for a bit now, and we're starting to see other players in the industry, industrious, Jamie Hidari, I think said now 75% of the deals in their portfolio are management based. And you're going to see a big push that way over the coming years. It's because it makes so much sense, both for the sort of co-working operator, but also for the landlord. So from the co-working operator, our side of the equation, obviously shedding lease liability is a good thing. It allows us to stay sort of nimble and respond to markets as we need to scale without having lease liability hanging over our heads. But what's really interesting for the landlord is they can actually make a lot more money now on their own space, because if you think about the traditional model, the lease-based arbitrage model that Jen was talking about, people come into these flex office spaces, flex retail spaces, and they pay a massive premium, whether they realize it or not, for that flexibility, for that functionality, the plug-and-play functionality. I'm going to make up round numbers, but if you're leasing space for $30 a foot and then monetizing it as a co-working provider and generating $90 a foot on it, there's a big delta in there, and that delta can become profit. What we're telling our real estate partners is, look, you're going to cover all the hard and soft costs associated with running the expense. You're going to do the fit out per our requirements because we know how to monetize on the space, and you're going to pay us a management fee. And usually the typical reaction is, what? Commercial real estate, super slow to change in many regards, but more and more of them are getting it, because if they start diving into the numbers and peel back the layers of the onion a little bit more, what they realize is what we're doing, we're running the space as though we were on a lease. We're generating that much higher top line revenue, and we're flowing all of that real estate arbitrage back to the landlords, and now they're making more money on their own space. They're also not competing with a third-party operator for the smaller users, for the companies that want to come in and have that flexibility. It's now a great opportunity for the landlord to get out in front of those companies, start building the relationship early, so as those companies grow and scale, as they do within the 1776 walls, where we'll have companies come in, maybe founder, co-founder, they hit 15, 20 people, and now they need to go out and get 3,000, 4,000 square feet of space. The landlord is minding their business and doing their job right. They become that landing pad for them, which is a really, really nice business model for the landlord. So now they're enjoying in the arbitrage of running the co-working space, and they're building up a pipeline, and they're able to use us, I think almost more importantly than anything else that we're talking about, as an amenity to the asset. So we fit in really well when you're talking about conference room facilities, when you're talking about gyms, but when you're talking about the experiences that tenants want in buildings now. We fit really nicely into that mix, so it allows these companies to turn the dial up and down as they need to, without hamstringing themselves with different lease liabilities along the way.
And as our model has changed, other real estate operators are changing theirs as well. Steelcase on here, they're a furniture company. We bought some furniture from Steelcase. They saw what was happening in the shared office space market, and invested in a company called Serendipity Labs, which is actually a franchise model for co-working spaces. But it makes perfect sense for them as a furniture company to invest in that and try to control what's happening with where their furniture goes. And there's companies like Brandywine that launch their own brands back. So they just launched that. There's just headlines a couple days ago that they want to do it themselves. Where the sweet spot that we hit is the landlords that say, that's not our business line. We don't know what we're doing, but we know we need to be a part of this. So they partner with us on it. And then there's companies like Regus, right? They were, in a lot of cases, the very beginning of what co-working was. They were the shared office space provider. And in a lot of markets, they've struggled and they've been looked at as sort of this old legacy company. So they launched Spaces as a new brand, and those spaces look completely differently, and they've fit them out in a different way. So they're rebranding some of what they're doing as well to be able to capitalize on what's happening. One thing that everybody agrees on pretty much in commercial real estate is that it's drastically changing, and the shared office space is taking a huge chunk out of it. It's just the different ways that all of these older companies are trying to monetize on that through partnerships with us, or trying different ways to do it themselves, or investing in other companies that are doing it as well.
So what I think is driving a lot of this is the wave of venture capital in the space. And so the three top brands up there that you see are logos, Fifth Wall, Navitas Capital, and Metaprop New York City, are all venture funds. So if you're not familiar with venture capital, for large venture capital funds, funds that are raising, let's say, $100 million or more, the model is really simple. You have a few smart guys and gals who have a thesis on a particular market, and they go out to institutions, so endowments like universities or pension funds or sovereign nations, and say, hey, you guys need to diversify your portfolio as well. You should put a little portion in the venture. We're going to invest in these very, very early stage companies. Sometimes it's later stage, and they're going to outpace the market and give you outpaced returns. The reality is only the top few preeminent venture capital firms in the world do outpace the S&P year over year, decade over decade. But nonetheless, people think it's a great way to diversify. And as I think Facebook came online back when I was in college, the idea of startups has been now glorified. And so you're seeing crazy valuations, new companies. Technology has also enabled young companies to build stuff bigger, cheaper, quicker, earlier, thanks to technology. So Fifth Wall, they're maybe $300 million fund. Their focus is purely prop tech. Anything that is real estate tech, built environment, property tech, that's all they invest in. Navitas Capital, same thing. Metaprop, an accelerator approach, getting early idea-based companies, as well as a venture fund on top of it. Just wanted to walk through the logos just to give you a sense of how deep and wide this is. Industrious, like WeWork, if you've never heard of them, like Benjamin's Desk or 1776, a traditional co-working company that made the leap from leasehold to management contracts. They are probably number 2, number 3, number 4, top 5 leading co-working player internationally now. Convene, we mentioned that. Villanova grads started out as centers for meetings and collaboration. The MBA programs, I believe, still work out of formerly the Hub in downtown Center City, which are now rebranded to Convene. The Hub was a small version of what Convene is today. Born here in Philly, acquired by Convene. That's where I went to grad school. I'm friends with the founder of the Hub. He's an investor both in 1776 and Houzer. So John is a good friend, knows a lot about this space. But Convene recognized that, to Jerry's point, building owners are looking for a broad-based approach to amenities, and it's not just about meeting space and conference rooms and events, but it's about workspace, it's about gyms, it's about all the things that come into the amenity-based approach to commercial real estate. So who else do we have on there? View This Space, technology company that helps landlords look at real-time data to make good decisions, to make sure that the building has all the data analytics in real time to make smart decisions about portfolio management. Wired Score, startup company that looks at buildings to judge the quality of the internet in a given building. Are they on Verizon fiber? Are they on Comcast fiber? And then gives it a rating. Truss, if you're familiar with LoopNet or CoStar, or you're interested in exploring a career in commercial real estate, you'll come across LoopNet and CoStar. Truss believes it's the next wave. Charlie and I used to talk about this years and years ago, but because of his background in tenant rep brokerage, one of the things that he said to me, which again cued the contrarian signal in my brain, was that something like 80 to 90% of deals are 10,000 square feet and below. But no one wants to focus on that because it's a very, very hard, fragmented space. And you do a lot of work, same amount of work for 100,000 square foot users you might for a 10,000 square feet, and the commissions are small. So Trust is taking a really interesting approach and basically mapping through 3D virtual Matterport technology in, I believe, DC, Philly, Austin, a couple other markets.
Chicago.
Maybe
Yeah.
5 or 6
Out
markets.
west now, too.
Raised about $8 million, and they're mapping 10,000 square feet below in commercial real estate buildings, basically building a new open source search engine to these spaces. Honest Buildings, another company like View This Space that's doing some really, really cool things, making sure that the construction budgets associated with all the fit outs and things that we do in commercial office buildings are on time and on budget and taking a digital approach. One of my favorite companies, this is called View. It's a new glass company. A lot of landlords are loving this glass because all those little shades you have to turn up and down, View does it just in the glass. You want to modulate the temperature or the glare that comes in from the sun, just dial down the glass and it'll open up more light or close light down. Really, really fascinating model. Bowery, a new approach to commercial real estate appraisal. Spruce, a new approach to residential and commercial title insurance. And then maybe my favorite is Spacious. Spacious recognized something that was happening in what I call excess capacity, underutilization. Say it one more time. Excess capacity, underutilization. Anytime you have an excess space of stuff that's underutilized, there's an opportunity. So they looked at restaurants throughout New York and San Francisco and said, what if we took these restaurants, which are really open at, let's say, 6 p.m. for dinner and we turned them into co-working spaces from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And rather than us bearing the leasehold or the fit out or all that stuff, restaurants are actually really cool these days. What if we were just able to create a more tailored experience and provide the coffee, provide the internet, not have any other that fixed cost burden? And what we'll do is we'll get all these restaurants to be our partners. They all need money. You want to be, what's the saying? It's one of my favorite sayings. How do you become a millionaire? Everybody want to hear this? Become a billionaire and then invest in restaurants. Restaurants are really, really difficult businesses. And so they recognize that restaurants want excess revenue. Restaurants are their partners. They provide the space. They curate the environment. They build a digital community. And in New York, there's 25 locations within, 15, 16 city blocks where you can go and you can see, these are the desks that are available. These are the rooms available. Really, really interesting model. I think that we have a better model up our sleeve that we might pursue at some point in time, but that's what Spacious is doing. So venture capital is now funding this. Billions and billions of dollars. This is only, 3, 6, 9, 10 companies? Hundreds of these companies are taking nibbles out of the commercial real estate space because they see it's really big, massive, fragmented, highly hyper-local, and there's an opportunity to chip away. I find it fascinating. Okay, so we talked about workspace, we talked about real estate tech. The cool thing is now real estate tech is now expanding horizontally. We talked about prop tech. All those companies that I mentioned on the price slide are really prop tech. What's happening now, this is case in point. All those companies on the right-hand side, these are big companies. So what I like about it is you see companies like Blackstone, Pearl Properties is a Philly-based a multifamily company. I didn't get a chance to have Rupert Adler on there. It's also a Philly-based company. Skanska, Accenture. Here's what's happening. Dream It Ventures. This is just a good Philly story. I just love this idea. Dream It Ventures, a top 10 accelerator in the world. If you're not familiar with accelerators, they are programs for startup companies to get access to capital, connections, and community. And essentially, they get a portion of your company if you go through the accelerator program. Pretty good deal. Dream It Ventures, based in Philly, decided to do something really cool. They partnered with Strategic Property Partners, I think that says, but strip that away. It's actually Jeff Vinnick, the owner of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Bill Gates' personal investment real estate fund. Joint venture, they're doing, I think it's a $3 billion ground-up development project in Tampa. And Dream It said, well, what if you could redesign a city from scratch? What would it look like? And so they're now partnering with a lot of the companies you saw on the last slide, as well as these old traditional companies that want to be active in the space. And so the startup companies get early customers from these folks. These folks get innovation and ideas from the startup companies. And Jeff and Bill get to build the city of the future. And so make no mistake, if you guys think that your lives are normal now, the speed at which technology has invaded commercial real estate in the last decade is only going to happen more rapidly and more rapidly. You guys won't even know. But for guys like Charlie and for Tony who've seen cycles, and real estate guys talk and gals talk in cycles, when you see cycles, the idea of co-working has been talked about probably every single cycle for the last 5, but it's now taking shape in a new way. And so same thing here. Some of these companies will be big busts, but some are going to be big, big winners and huge opportunities. So I'm really, really excited about what technology is doing in real estate, specifically commercial real estate. I love that it's invading the property tech space and eventually going to be changing how we think about both urban communities as well as what we're doing with malls by way of suburban communities. So we really just wanted to have this more engaging. I hope we didn't go too long. We really wanted to open this up to questions, tell little stories, hear from you guys, but we wanted to at least set the stage on the context about who we are, where we came from, what we're doing, why we think it's interesting, and why you think you guys should be paying attention to it. So thank you.